everybody, it's Romania Black. No big deal, it's just chapters 80 through 83 of Heaven Official's Blessing. I may have freaked out in the last set of chapters a wee bit. Maybe just a smidgen, right? But you know, it's a new year, and we're diving into Heaven Official's Blessing. We are barely into the story. We're barely into the series as a whole, but we are barely into this volume, and I love this volume so much. Last set of chapters, I had to take a good solid week's break because even though I wanted to instantly dive into the other chapters, I'm like, my brain needed to sit for a minute. But we're back. I was also waiting for the Manhua chapter to come out. Sad days. It has not. It's still not dropped, which Star Ember's been sick, so that's okay. And the translators are all transitioning in the Billy app. It will come out eventually. When it does, I'll be super happy. But you know what? Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Maybe chapter 87 needs to come when we're at our lowest point in the novel so that we won't freak out. And we'll have something to kind of ease our palate a little bit, right? But I'm not gonna lie, I'm so hyped for today's episode and reaction. I poured 2 cups of coffee. I had this one already made, and then I started making this one, and then I went back into this room and was like, oh, I haven't finished this yet, so now I have 2 cups. So I am set. I am set with coffee. I am ready to go. I am also ready to go with this package that came in that I'm pretty sure is volume 5. Now, unfortunately, I did accidentally, a picture of the volume cover was shared in the Discord, and I accidentally looked at it and was like, welp, I kind of know what the cover looks like now, so if you're expecting a big reaction, it's not going to happen. So all I can say is, please, if you are in the Discord, on Twitter, anywhere, don't share pictures of volumes 6 through 8 don't share them in the Discord without spoiler tagging them. I know you're excited, but please, I don't mute any channels in my Discord because I want to interact with everybody, right? So I don't mute any channels. So when notifications pop up, I just click on them. And if they're spoiler tagged, I don't have to worry about it. They're just black boxes. But this was just a picture, and I was like, oh. And I felt kind of bad because I'd been spending the last several weeks avoiding it. And now I'm like, well, there went that. So please, spoiler tag on Discord, volumes 6, 7, and 8 until I get them, until you see it in this reaction. Please spoiler tag, or unless you ask me if I've seen it yet. Because otherwise, I don't want to be spoiled, right? But it's okay. So let's look at this sucker. Oh, there it is. Look at them messing with his hair. I am curious because, you know, this one, it reminds me a lot of the Poochie Shrine, right? It reminds me of that one when Shilian was doing his hair. So that could mean a lot of different, because he's in San Long mode. So that could mean a lot of different things. It could mean they go back to the shrine. By the time we get to volume 5, it could mean that he's remembering volume 5, the events of the OVA. I'm curious. I do want to see if I like looking at the little picture we get inside. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. It's so cute. It's so cute. He's carrying Hua Chong while standing on top of the logs, and he has a little chick on his head. That's adorable. Freaking adorable. I love it so, so much. But yeah, now I get to look forward to this. The good news is having volumes 4 and 5, we are set for a while. 2023, we are set. And then I'm not exactly sure when volume 6 is going to be published, but I have not pre-ordered volume 6 yet, but as soon as it's an option, I'm going to. At this point, I know a lot of the people on the Discord that are international, they're not in the US, they've talked about how there's been a lot of problems getting copies of these volumes once they go out of print. And I'm like, ugh. So I don't want to get in that situation where I can't get a copy. I pretty much got all of the Modao Zushi ones ordered, and I've got all Scum Villain Self-Saving System. I've got all of them ready to go, but I don't want to miss out on a chance to get this. Even though I have the digital copy, I want the print copy to support MXTX and also to have it because I like comparing them side by side. And I want to see the illustrations. So as soon as they're ready for pre-order, gonna get on that. But that's exciting. I do think that cover's really cute. It's a very cute cover compared to the kind of doom and gloomy cover here and the very sensual cover of volume 4. So I'm like, which we still have 3 to go. But yes, please do not spoil me images of those. mark that in your calendars on your memo pages. Please don't. But y'all, I do have a few comments I want to go to before we dive into this set of, there's 4 chapters here. 4 chapters this week, which I can't do math. So at first I was like, I'm just doing 3 chapters. Then I was like 80, 81, 82, 80. I guess it is 4, but it's only one part. It's technically section 37 of the series, and we're on part 23. So yep, pages 127 through 162, a nice little chunk that we're looking at today. But I do have some comments before we start. This isn't from anybody, but as I was going back and rereading chapters 77 through 79, which I've done a few times now because I really like that section, Shilian's acceptance of Junwoo putting the curse shackles on him and shackling his power, in the OVA, it makes much more sense now why he was so like nonchalant about Junwoo. When Hwa-chang's like, well, don't you hate Junwoo? Don't you dislike him? And Shilian's like, no, he was just doing his job. It's like now it hits so much harder because it's like Junwoo told him, he's like, just don't do this. Shilian went out and did it anyway, and things, as we know, went horribly wrong. And so now 800 years later, it makes sense that Shilian's like, no, I was really arrogant and did not listen. And I told him that he could do anything to me if I disobeyed. He could imprison me in a mountain for 1,000 years. So shackling my powers is, I deserved it. And it's like, ugh. And of course, Hwa-chang doesn't agree, but I think it makes much more sense now why Shilian was so easily dismissive of Junwoo, because we know now just Shilian barged in, said, I'm doing this, and didn't listen, and said he could punch him any way he wanted to. So I was like, okay, that makes more sense. SQQLBH314 talks about how Shilian couldn't even recognize the consort he was supposed to marry. So it's not crazy to think that he wouldn't recognize Hwa-chang once he's hit puberty. And that's exactly right. Like what got me was the fact that Fengshen and Muqing didn't even recognize him. At that point, I was like, okay, Hwa-chang's changed enough in this short amount of time that even they don't recognize him. Good to know. Paula talked about how MXTX touching on real life issues through her story. Yeah, there's a lot of real life connections, talking about immigration, talking about war, talking about all these different things that affect us in real life. What I like about it is that she does so in a way that's not like, it's not preachy, and it's not like so obvious that you're like, okay, you're making this statement. It's very cleverly done, and it's noticeable, and you can connect it, but it doesn't feel like it's bapping you over the head with it, right? And then the heavenly realm, Paula noted that it's weird the heavenly realm is just so like nonchalant about Shanla falling. And to me, I feel like it's almost one of those situations where the heavenly realm, they've gotten to the point where they realize that they can't and should not do anything. So either they remain distant enough that they just don't even watch, like if I can't see it, it's not happening sort of thing, or they just emotionally distance themselves from the issue and treat it like it's like just no big deal, because otherwise, if you think too much on it, you might realize what a bad situation this is, kind of like what Shilian's doing, and you'll go crazy, right? So I thought that was interesting, but that's kind of my thoughts on it right now. Maybe we'll learn stuff later on that will change my opinion, but for right now, that's kind of my view on it, okay? So, Beautiful World said that sometimes MXTX names characters based on the date that she publishes the chapter or that they debut in. And I thought that was really interesting because it kind of skews and makes me think less about like the horoscope compatibility, because some authors are very deliberate in that they pick characters and their birthdays based on horoscope compatibility. You can just, especially in like BL series, it's just very obvious when signs are compatible. Or for example, like in Skate the Infinity, there's 2 characters whose signs are very compatible in very personality specific ways. And so it makes perfect sense why they are those specific signs. But here, it kind of reads to me like Oda in One Piece, the manga One Piece. In that series, Oda picked a couple birthdays out for his main characters, but then like other birthdays are chosen by fans, others are based on their name and like the puns that associate with like months or days. So there's not really like a compatibility reason for it. And that's kind of how this strikes me. So in the last section, when someone had told me that Shilian is a Cancer and Hua Chong is a Gemini, and they're not really compatible signs. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. But now it makes more sense if they were picked based on when their character appeared, then it doesn't matter. So I should not be reading into the horoscopes too much in this series because it may not matter at all. And so I was like, that's good to know. So thank you, beautiful world, for pointing that out. Anastasia had a really, really good comparison of J.R.R. Tolkien, which I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I'm like, in high school, that was my jam. And so the scene in Helm's Deep where Legolas, the elf, is speaking to Aragorn in Elvish, and he's telling him, he's like, all these people are going to die, and you can't do anything about it. And Aragorn replies back in his human tongue, and he's like, that I will die as one of them. And it's like, it's such a good scene. But it does remind me of like Shilian being like Aragorn, being like, I'm going to try anyway to save them because I believe in these people and I want to keep them safe. And then Legolas reminds me of Mu Ching. So I thought that was really cool. I liked that a lot. I'm like, so is function Gimli? Is that what that means? So that was really good. Millipop had a really cool observation, and it just like clicked, and I was like, oh, that's so cool, because one of my favorite scenes in the last set of chapters is my theory that all 4 calamities are there with Shilian. And how weird is it that Shilian, we've talked about him being ominous and having bad luck. If Shilian inadvertently caused all 4 of these calamities to come together, the biggest bad luck of them all, right? Born under a star. And so I thought it was very interesting, Millipop's conversation here, that Chi-Rong in the forest, hanging upside down and bleeding, could have inspired him later on to kill people and hang them upside down in forests as they bled out. It was like because it's like Chi-Rong's character in the present keeps going back to 800 years ago, keeps going back to his origins. And a lot of his things are kind of based on his past. Like the way he sets up his lair with like all the fancy goblets and the gold reminds him of Shanla. The fact that he has the lanterns reminds him of the lanterns in the palaces and the temples. And the fact that he hangs bodies upside down to bleed out could remind him of when he was hanging upside down in the forest and Shilian came to save him. It's just everything with Chi-Rong is so fascinating because it's everything he does is connected to his past, which is so fascinating. And it's kind of a contrast to Shilian, who does really not much compared to his past, right? He kind of goes the opposite direction, whereas Chi-Rong tries to lean in and kind of keep that memory alive. So that's so fascinating. Thank you for pointing that out, Millipop. I was just like, I had like a moment of, he does do that. That's so cool. It's nice little subtle stuff like that, right? That makes me love this story all the more. And then Sarah Linda had 2 really cool things. One is talking about function. Sarah Linda brought up a really good point. And it kind of is interesting that function, he doesn't hate women. It's not that he's disgusted by them, but Sarah Linda's like, it could be that he just views them as alien. He respects them, and he wants to be kind to them, but because he has no clue about women, he just avoids them at all costs and freaks out and gets afraid of them when they get too close because he doesn't know what to do. So when the Windmaster's like bouncing her boobs up on him, he's like, I don't know what to do, get away. I don't want to disrespect you. It's great. I like that view of function. And also Sarah Linda said, and people have been talking about this in the Discord, that apparently there was a TGCF presentation in Thailand through Bilibili, and the director of the Donghua said that if all goes well, knock on wood, all goes well and things are fine, we should expect season 2 of the Donghua either in summer or fall. I'm fine with that. I'm great with that. I still don't know. I will probably put the novel reactions on hold at that point to watch this season Donghua. It will just depend where we're at in the novel. Like if we're at like a novel, we'll be, I'm sure we'll be in volume 4 by that point. If we're like this far away from finishing volume 4 or like halfway through, I may finish the volume before starting season 2. If I have no other reaction, if I have a slot of reactions open at that time, I may just do it simultaneously. I don't know. It will depend on when we get more information and know what's coming out at what time. I don't want to overwhelm myself, but at the same time, I definitely want to watch the Donghua when it comes out. So So we may put the volume reactions on a hiatus while season 2 is going on, and it will be a nice refresher. It would be ideal if we could finish a volume up and then watch season 2 as like a refresher of things, and we can kind of comment on those and what we know of the story so far, and then go back to the novel readings. We'll just play it by ear and see how it goes. But I've talked for 15 minutes. We need to dive into this story. I'm so freaking excited, as you can tell. I can't wait. So I'm excited, y'all. I have been very patient trying to wait for the Manhua chapter, but today I was like, it's been over a week. I'm not waiting any longer. We're just going to dive right in and just see what happens. So we are going to read chapters 80 through 83 and just see what happens. I'm sure it'll be fine, right? Of course. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. All right. Land of the Tinder. Body of gold hard pressed against desire. So I don't know what Land of the Tinder means. Body of gold sounds like Shilian, and hard pressed against desire. If I'm thinking of desire, I'm thinking of Hua Chong. So, okay. All right. And we ended the last chapter with Shilian telling Hua Chong that you'd be good with a scimitar, which is a preface to Yi Ming, right? Shilian, you're just giving him ideas for when he becomes a ghost. And the way that he killed the Binu and showing off a few maneuvers. You've never used a saber, right? You use a sword, but the sword is tricky. Although it's fast and aggressive, it's restrictive and it's difficult to extend out. If you've never used a saber before, try it next time. I think you might be even stronger with it. And Shilian knows his swords, so, oh my God, you've influenced Ming's existence. Oh my gosh, you've influenced Doom, Shilian. What have you done? If ever Shilian saw someone with notable skill in martial arts, he couldn't help but want to approach and talk about it because he's like a nerd about it, right? It's not criticism, it's just him wanting to exchange ideas. He oftentimes didn't need to think. He could just glance and pick up on the particulars. Even if he couldn't explain why it was, he had a gut instinct about it, right? That boy listened intently. Oh, so usually out of respect, people would listen, but there were very few who'd pay attention. So people in the past would just think, oh, he's just geeking about swords. Okay, Shilian. I'm like, what do you mean, okay, Shilian? But this boy listened intently, gobbled up his suggestions, and would look down at the sword in his hand from time to time. And Shilian rambled on for a while before suddenly, it's like, weren't we chasing after my cousin? Weren't we doing something? Before suddenly there were more rustling noises from the woods, like something was crawling around rapidly. He remembered that they were still in danger, and that it wasn't really the time and place to get excited. Oh, who knows if there may be more evil on this mountain. This place needs a thorough cleansing. The boy nodded vigorously and presented the steel sword to Shilian with both hands. Just defend yourself. You didn't leave earlier, and now there's no way for you to go. I'll do my best to protect you, but stay alert. Oh. It hit dead on. A yelp. There was a strong stench of blood. And Shilian was puzzled. If it was Binu, then after having been blown up, they would have sticky body fluids. The viscosity of it was such that the smell of blood wouldn't emit. Oh. It was a large Binu on the ground, blown into pieces. But a scrap of skin off a human head. Oh, with hairs attached. Oh, so the Binu had killed somebody. The human had been killed. The young soldier tagging along right behind. Oh, the further they walked, the thicker the spots of blood became and the stronger the stench. Oh, I bet that it attacked like the Yongin people. That little soldier, like calling Hua Chong that little soldier is really adorable. Raised his sword and ran in front of Shilian to shield him, but Shilian pulled him back behind. A semi-large cave appeared before them. The cave was the resting place of some passers-by, but now corpses carpeted the ground. 20 to 30 Binu were clambering over those dead bodies. Oh, like zombies. The young woman looked to be in pain. Her guts split open. Oh my God. She was still alive. Oh. Oh my God. That's so gross. MXTX, what are you doing? Shelian blew out a blast from his palm without blinking. I'm not going to read that. It's so disgusting. I don't want to read it. Oh. Among the corpses were men and women, old and young, their faces ashen, their attire simple. They were young and civilians, and Shelian couldn't help but be shocked. He had thought the sudden appearance of monsters and demons were called forth by the strange white-clothed being. The white-clothed being saved Long Ying, so they must be allies. But then how come the Binu would feast on these young and civilians? Non-human creatures would never form a pact with humans for no reason. So did this mean this was the condition for Long Ying agreeing to their alliance? Were the lives of his followers his bargaining chips? That's interesting. I don't know if that's the case, though. I don't even know if Long Ying and Bai Wusheng made a pact. Bai Wusheng just maybe is keeping Long Ying around because he's like, you seem like you're going to be useful. I'm not going to let you die. But they may not even have a pact to begin with. So, The young woman was full of pain and terror. Don't kill me. I didn't do anything bad. Don't kill me. In spite of himself, Shelian recalled the family of 3 who died below the city walls, and what sins had they committed? He knelt, bent down, leaned over and spoke in a gentle, soothing voice. Don't be scared. There's nothing to be scared of. We're here to save you. Yet the little soldier pointed his sword at the young woman. She might be an evil spirit from the deep mountains. Okay, of course Shelian knew this was a possibility. He still felt he couldn't leave her alone. All right. He confirmed she was indeed a human, and one that had never practiced any martial arts. Okay. Oh, he began treating her. He took a bottle of medicine from his sleeve, the white smoke permeating slowly. The medicine could temporarily slow down any poison and was amazingly effective against wounds. Shelian didn't go stingy on the holy cure and used up the entire bottle on her. Oh. Okay. Are you from Yong'an? How did this happen? I am. I don't know how this came to be either. Everything was just fine, but suddenly my dad died. My brother died too. Who's the murderer who killed them? Or what killed them? The murderer who killed them was you. Her face turned fierce. Her 2 eyes flashed and bulged. She opened her arms and pounced, clutching Shelian in her embrace. Oh! He pierced her heart with the sword. After being stabbed, her death should have been a sure thing, yet she started laughing uproariously in delight, clutching onto Shelian firmly, refusing to let go, and stayed in that position until she stopped breathing. She clung on so tightly the young soldier strained to pull her dead body off. Oh! Your Highness, are you okay? Shelian had thought the young woman was going to ambush him as a last-ditch effort, yet she had no weapons on her. She didn't even bite or scratch. She only clung to him as tightly as if that was enough, unrelenting even after death. Confounded, he replied. I'm all right. He trailed off as sudden dizziness mockingly assaulted him. Oh, Your Highness! Oh, what'd she do to him? Oh. It was like Shelian's innards were on fire. He couldn't speak, didn't want to speak, and didn't want to hear anyone speak either. He shook his head and raised his hand unspeakingly. All around them came the sound of a woman giggling. Oh, the 2 of them startlingly realized the third person wasn't around. It was coming from a bright red flower. They'd fallen into a trap, the land of the tinder. This wasn't the land of the tinder that you're thinking of. The land of the tinder was a flower demon that loved to gather and suck to feast on the essence of men living off their blood. Oh. Cover your mouth and nose tight. Don't breathe in the flower's fragrance. The young soldier already had bandages wrapped securely around his face and a layer of filter so he didn't breathe in any scent. Hearing Shelian, he tightened the bandages. But then Shelian had nothing to cover with, so he ripped off a piece of the cleanest part of his sleeve, rubbed it hard and patted it down until it was cleaner, and passed it in both hands. Oh, no need, it's too late. When he went to treat the young woman, he may have been guarded, but he didn't guard against scent that was pressed closely. Not knowing the flower pinned on her was a blossom of the land of the tinder. Before she died, she clung firmly to Shi Lian, ensuring she wouldn't fail. This meant Shi Lian already had unknowingly inhaled many mouthfuls of the tinder fragrance, truly refreshing the spirit. Once the tinder fragrance entered the body, men would become impetuous. Numbness to start, then mania. Right then, Shi Lian's whole body was already listless, like all the nerves were removed. Once the numbness passed, he'd become a cask of explosives. Oh, well, if that strange white cloth being were to appear once more, Shi Lian really didn't know how certain he'd be able to face it. And he couldn't be sure of its might either. His first reaction was to reach for his bottle of medicine, but he realized he emptied the bottle to treat the young woman. In the end, the person still didn't survive. Oh my God, why can't things go Shi Lian's way for 1 second? He used up all the medicine and now he has nothing. Of course not. Why would we expect anything different? Land of the Tinder was historically referred to a brothel or aphrodisiac. MXTX is creating her own version of Land of the Tinder here. For those who aren't familiar, Land of the Tinder is a common concept in Chinese fantasy, and readers expect seductresses or love poison when they see it in the text. Oh, okay. Gotcha. He glanced at the dead body next to him. The young woman wore a happy smile as if she was sincerely glad to sink the enemy into a trap before death and could pass in peace to see her family. He could only blame the bloody scene that softened the flower's dangerous shade, and the stench of blood that lightened the strange fragrance of the blossoms. He had never imagined the face of the young girl, only in her teens, could bear such resentment, that she could commit such an extreme act. The flower demons were exploding with excitement, muttering, "He took the bait, caught him. It really is His Highness the Crown Prince. It's him. He's so handsome. My root couldn't hold back any longer. It's going to thrust out of the ground. This is highly sexual." The young soldier swung his sword to slash, cleaving a field of flower shrubs. Yet those stems were nimble, and that sword was worn. After one slash, it became dull. The flower demons rocked back and forth, squealing. "Oh my gosh, this little Gege! Your bush hasn't even grown in yet! Yet you're so ferocious! I'm on the verge of blooming. How will you repay me?" Oh, his eye was flashing with rage. "You're dead. I'll burn you all to death." The green leaves of those flower demons perched on stems, yelling, "My, so scary. We didn't provoke you. Why are you so mad?" This is like Alice in Wonderland, where all the flowers start getting up and yelling at Alice. That's what this reminds me of. Oh my gosh. Well, don't burn them. They're demons. If you set them on fire, they'll emit a poisonous gas, and you can't pull them out either. He dropped his hands at ready to pluck, and Shi Lian explained weakly, "There are poisonous thorns all over the stem." The flower demons flirtatiously jibbed. "My gosh, Your Highness is so sweet. Thank you for protecting us. Just wait, we're going to bear fruit soon. We'll definitely take good care of you." Ugh. Men who cultivated abstinence from birth are so hard to come by. Even if your power would drop a level, if we deflower you, there's no other way. Oh my God, these flowers are seductresses! Oh my God! Ugh! Ugh! The flower petals in the Land of the Tinder rubbed against each other, giggling, their ambrosial, perverse intentions more than obvious. The young soldier was bewildered, not quite understanding what abstinence, deflower, or level, but he could tell that it didn't mean anything good. So he continued to swing his sword madly, cutting down the flowers, roaring in rage, trying desperately to cover up the sound of that teasing laughter, not wanting Shi Lian to hear. Shi Lian, on the other hand, was cracking his knuckles. So that was it. So everything that transpired tonight was truly designed especially for dealing with him. Kidnapping Qirong was them counting on the pride and consideration he possessed as the martial god of Shanla, that he would choose to come after them alone, minimizing the situation, of course, and that heavily wounded young woman was meant to use up his medicine, leaving him powerless to relieve himself. The cooperation between humans and demons was meant to lead him to this point. Shi Lian's method of cultivation really did require a body of purity. The followers who worshipped the ascended cultivators who practiced this stream were firmly convinced in transcendence of their gods who were untouched by earthly desires. Thus, if they couldn't protect their purity, their following would no doubt collapse, devastating their powers. Although it wouldn't be serious to the point of falling back into mortality from godhood, there was still the possibility of redemption after many more years of cultivation. But at that very moment, there was no way, no time for him to sit behind closed doors to cultivate for years. The statute of purity was strict at the Royal Holy Pavilion, and Shelian excelled as the number one in upholding these rules, never having broken or breached any of them, and thought himself steady as a rock of steel. Not even gates could ripple the water in his heart. He also went through many trials, completing them perfectly each time. Yet even if his heart was as still as water, he was still young and easily unnerved. With that little soldier right beside him, listening to those flower demons blatantly splashing words of depravity onto him, plus that lingering fragrance making his blood boil, his mind tempestuous, Shelian couldn't help but become embarrassed, his face reddening. He just couldn't stand. He could still somehow hang on for a moment, but if those Land of the Tinders really bore fruit, then it'd be troublesome. The best course of action was, of course, to return to the royal holy capital immediately and have Fengchen and Muqing shield him, but his legs were limp. He could barely stand. Without any other way, he called to the little soldier with a strained voice, "You, come over here." Ah! MXTX author notes, losing virginity will only damage spiritual power, not martial might. Although martial might and spiritual power can be combined and amplified, their nature is different. Besides, only Shelian's chosen stream is this troublesome, that an X life would damage his cultivation. Some heavenly officials are much smarter and would choose a stream where the more they X, the stronger they become. But in most streams, an X life and cultivation are completely unrelated. Okay, I'm going to take notes on this one, and then we'll come back. Okay. Land of the Tinder, body of gold, hard pressed against desire. 2. All right. He turned around hesitantly, but didn't go over. The situation didn't allow any time to be wasted. "Don't be scared. I won't do anything to you. Get over here quick." Okay, so yeah, Huachong's like, knowing what this flower can do I need to come over to you? And then he rushed to Shelian's side, but came to an abrupt stop 2 feet away. "Help me up. Take me away." He very carefully took that. Oh, it was like a man on the brink of death had finally found someone to rely on in an instant. His entire body slackened and collapsed onto the boys. Sunken deep in the tender fragrance, his temperature was high, his body burning, yet somehow the boy's hands were equally as hot, and there was even slight trembling. No, because he loves Shelian so much. He inhaled and pushed himself to stand. He didn't want to have someone smaller than him supporting his entire person, but with the boy's help, they walked agonizingly for a few steps. The flower demons called out to him when they saw them move away. "Oh no, your highness, don't leave us. He is waiting for you on the road, so if you leave here, you'll bump into him." "Who is he?" Speaking of that person, even the Land of Tinders were slightly terrified. After some hesitation, they mumbled, "He is him." They all nodded. "He is him, the one who brought us here." Oh, even if they didn't dare speak that person's name or identity, that half-crying, half-smiling mask immediately appeared into his mind. Which is funny because they don't say his name, right? So what you're saying is if I go back now, the one who planted you will hunt me down halfway on the road, but if I stay here, he won't come, correct? They nodded their heads. Fury burst into the flames in Shelian's chest. To trap him without killing him in this hateful situation, were they playing with him? Why not simply just battle to the death? Does not seem like Bai Wusheng's strategy. Bai Wusheng does not seem like a noble battling man. He seems like, no, I'm going to trick you to die. I'm not going to face you head on. No. Work smarter, not harder, is Bai Wusheng's motto. He collected himself and forced down his irritation. It seemed the other party had no intention of facing him head on and only wanted to damage his spiritual power, make him fall from grace and lose followers. The flower demons may not be speaking the truth, even if they told lies. If you thought about it, even though this boy could support him or carry him on his back, they might still not be able to return safely. Should the other party purposely throw some women at them halfway down the road, the situation might get even worse or more awkward. Shelian exhaled a feverish breath and closed his eyes. "Take me to the cave over there." The young soldier followed his instructions and helped him cross over that ground piled with corpses. When they came to the cave, Shelian gasped in a low voice, "Stop. Where's your sword?" "Stab me." "Oh." Don't worry, just stab and stab deeply. I need to draw an array. There's no other spiritual devices on hand, so there needs to be blood. Your Highness, please use my blood. Oh, no need your blood. But his words didn't make it in time. A deep gash appeared on the boy's arm, fresh blood flowing from it. Never mind. Shelian's blood was an invaluable holy treasure, so how could a mortal's blood compare? But seeing how sincere this little soldier was, he couldn't bear to tell him that what he'd done was pointless. Thanks, but we still need some of my blood as a catalyst. Thus, Shelian took that sword, and with trembling hands, it took him a few tries before he stabbed the center into his arm. Crimson holy blood streamed down his white arm and dripped into 2 curved lines before the cave, drawing 2 barriers. It could be said that it was a waste of a god's gift. Shelian also took care to mix some of that boy's blood, and after completing the array, the dizziness grew stronger. Let's go in. It was dark inside the cave. That boy took out a small flare torch from inside his robes and ignited it, and the firelight brightened their surroundings with intense light. The soldier's face was hidden behind the bandages, covering him completely, and that Shelian's discomposure was open for all to see. His cold sweat sticky, his hair disheveled, his lips red and swollen. It was the cut created when he bit his lips to sanctify his own sword earlier. The firelight stabbed at Shelian's eyes, hurting them, and the waves of heat were torturing him. Don't light the fire, kill it. The boy immediately threw the small torch on the ground and stepped to extinguish it, and they sank into darkness once more. After being helped into the cave, Shelian sat himself down and seated in a meditative position. A moment later, he spoke laboriously. I have a mission for you. Can you do it? I'm willing to risk my life to do my duty. I drew 2 sets of barriers in front of the cave. The outer barrier is to ensure nothing outside gets in. The inner barrier is to prevent anyone from inside getting out. There's enough space between the 2 barriers for 1 person. Stay there and watch over the cave entrance. No matter what you hear outside, don't go out. Same logic, don't come in no matter what sounds you hear from me. Your Highness, you're staying here by yourself? Yes. I don't know what I'll do. In any case, you can't come in no matter what. Under these circumstances, Shelian couldn't leave, but waiting for reinforcements, Qirong was probably still stumbling down the road, and just the trip back to the royal capital would take a long while. Who knew when reinforcements would come? He could only seal off the small area temporarily, set off wards, and figure out the best way to treat the tender fragrance. Fruits born of flower demons are powerful temptresses. They're most likely going to ripen soon. Just then the fragrance in the air suddenly surged, cutting off his words. That gentle, infectious scent filled the air from the earth to the sky, and the flower demons let out an ecstatic, delicate cackling. My root. Oh, ew, my root is hard. My flowers have ripened. Oh, gross. Ugh. He could feel his heart beating faster and blood rush to his brain. Hurry and go. Don't breathe in that scent. If they get close, don't be scared. Nothing can cross that bloodline, but as long as your feet remain inside the barrier, you can strike them with your sword. The boy glanced outside, nodded with conviction, and rushed out with the sword in hand, stationing himself between the 2 bloodlines by the entrance of the cave. Bushes of flower shrubberies grew vividly in color. The briar field was quivering as if something beneath was about to rupture the ground. And it was the head of a woman. Oh, ew! We're gonna fight off these women so they can't get to Shelian! We have to preserve his demisexuality. Oh my god. It looked to be drunk with joy, her eyes squeezing shut into crescent lines. An entire arm crawled out. The fruits of the land of the timber were formed under the whiskers of the roots. They shaped into various forms of women. Oh. Gross. They patted off the remaining mud on their bodies, fixed their hair. Oh, they're all just like naked women walking towards them. I don't know how the Donghua's gonna do this. Her Highness, we're coming. Oh. He sat in the lowest position with his eyes closed, chanting the Ethics Sutra mentally. Yet it had little use. Those flower demons called to him without shame, chirping familiar language like baby, sweetheart, gege, Didi, all sorts of monikers, throwing his mind into turmoil. He changed to reciting out loud, 5 sights cause blindness, 5 sounds cause deafness, galloping hunts cause madness, rare goods cause obstructions, calm over impatience, coldness over heat, silence is the ultimate virtue. Those who are kind will receive kindness, those who are unkind will receive unkindness. Outside the cave, the flower demons clapped and laughed tauntingly. You're not a monk, why are you reciting sutras? And it sounded like the young soldier had wordlessly become violently aggressive, chopping and slashing madly, chasing those demons away as they cried, "Murder! You cursed little brat, little destroyer of beauty! No tenderness in your heart at all. Scary, scary, vicious at such an age. Imagine him full grown! Imagine him indeed, right?" Didi is the familiar address of little brother. The verses are from the Ethics Sutra, Tao Te Ching, the Book of the Way of Virtue by Laozi. It's a Chinese literary classic alongside the I Ching and also one of the philosophical foundational texts of Taoism. Those flower demons were trying to squish themselves into the cave like starving beasts, but they just couldn't squeeze in. They didn't notice the bloody array on the ground and thought the blockage was caused by that boy. After some discussion, they gathered not too far away and called to him, "Little Gege, why must you block us from going in? It's not like we're going to do anything bad. We just want to have a good time with His Highness. Be a good little soldier and don't hinder us from doing His Highness some good." That little Didi is so mean. A shame that he's so young, too tender. He probably doesn't even know what doing good means. They fell over themselves over a mocking of giggles, and Shilian opened his eyes slightly, only to see the entrance of the cave stood a black shadow, one of that boy whose sword in hand was determined to never move, even in death. "I say, little Gege, don't stick yourself in there like that hard shaft. What are you planning? Why not come over to me and have some fun? What sorts do you fancy? Do you like my type?" The young soldier didn't respond. They thought in order to enter the cave they must pass him, so they brought forth their tricks, coddling in their words. "What about me? How about this? Do you fancy my sort? Look at me. Do you like this?" Yet the flirtation at the beginning, changing to complaints and then curses at the end, the boy still only ignored them if they were far away and struck at them if they were close. Shilian knew that before the land of the Tinders emerged from the ground, they could change their own shapes at will. He wanted to warn the boy, but due to the current distressing predicament, he didn't dare open his mouth. Finally, when pressing waves of heat passed, he was able to gasp, "Don't look at them." Shilian's voice was terribly low and soft, but the young soldier instantly heard him and cried in response, "Yes, sir, your highness, how are you?" "If things get too hard, I'm fine. If things get too hard, shut your eyes and seal your nose and your mouth." "Oh, I know. I bet your favorite type must look like this." Oh no, is it going to look like Shilian? What a hand, what a hand. Look at this brat, is completely stunned. I bet it's like this. It must be like this. That shitty brat is a rock. Who knew we were so wrong? Such balls at such an age. You win, we're nothing. How about it, little guy? Come quick and enjoy this sweet, delicious sight. There won't be another shop that serves you a dish if you leave this land. Oh. The young soldier, though, was thoroughly incensed, and the tone of his voice was filled with frost. You are seeking death. Shilian was about to reach his limit. Oh my God. His sight blurred and his ears drummed. He could no longer sit upright. He collapsed forward and barely held himself from the ground with his hands. But this trembled, loosened, and gritted teeth. Oh, in that moment of delirium, a painful, wretched moan escaped his lips. Oh my God, this is just, what are these chapters? How do we even go to this? Okay, I'm going to take notes real quick, and then we're going to go back. What? So yeah, so the flowers made a Shilian look-alike. They don't say it in the book, but I bet that's what it is, because we'll talk about it in the discussion, but Chapter 82, Land of the Tinder, Body of Gold, Hard Pressed Against Desire, 3. Oh, yeah, Your Highness. Oh. One would think he was sobbing. Never in his life, before or after Ascension, had Shilian experienced such a grueling ordeal. This was much more arduous than the toughest trial at the Royal Holy Pavilion. The strength of his arm supporting his weight drained, and his body keeled over to the side. He laid on the ground, delirious and barely conscious, and he saw the boy looked as if he wanted to enter. "Don't come in," I said, "no matter what you hear." He stopped in his step, and he flipped onto his back facing up, and regulated his breathing despite the waves of heat crashing through every part of his body. The flower demons outside heard him tossing and turning, that fire burning intensely, and clapped while laughing. "Why are you so hard on yourself? Today you're refusing yourself a good time because you're scared of losing followers. Tomorrow you'll be scared to do other things because you're scared of losing followers. How is that any way for a heavenly official to live? More like a prisoner, hands tied by those devotees. It's not worth it being a god like that. You're going to lose your place sooner or later, so why not enjoy yourself now? Things come and go, no need to mind the petty details." "Oh, shut up," he shouted. The dead flower demons naturally weren't afraid of him right now. They started teasing the little soldier anew. "Little Dee, don't you think we're right? Aren't you feeling miserable standing there?" Shilian violently tore his robes, wanting even just a sliver of coolness. Suddenly, he realized how come strength was returning to his arms. Although that last bit of power didn't last long and left just as quickly when he checked himself, sure enough, the numbness had passed and energy was gradually increasing. Yet Shilian's heart was dropping. The effect of the tender fragrance was numbness at first, followed by mania. The numbness had passed, so in a moment, madness and passion would fill his veins. Although he drew 2 lines of barriers at the entrance of the cave, the interior one, drawn especially to prevent his crazed self from going out, once mania took over, he was not certain whether the barrier would be enough to stop him. This moment of clarity was a rare blessing, and Shilian grabbed onto it with both hands, thinking rapidly of ways to handle the situation. Suddenly, a small realization came to him. Tender fragrance worked rapidly. Usually the moment blood rushed to the brain, all control would be lost. So how had he managed to stay afloat until now? Was there no other reason than his exceptional steadiness of mind? Thinking of this, he inhaled a long breath and inclined his head, and then called to the silhouette of the boy by the cave's entrance, still looking indecisive over entering. "You, come in." Hearing his call, that young soldier appeared to want to rush to his side immediately, but after a few steps, he seemed to remember Shilian's angry instruction of "don't come in no matter what you hear," and he hesitated. Shilian was also feeling woeful at changing his mind so quickly, so he called again miserably, "Just come in first." That boy stopped hesitating and rushed in. The tunnel of the cave was long and narrow, the interior warm and humid. Darkness filled the space, not even raised fingers could be seen. That boy used Shilian's rasping breaths to find where he was. "Put down your sword. Put it on the ground right next to me, not too far away." "Yes, sir." "Please help me up." The boy half knelt next to him, extended both arms to help support Shilian. However, the moment his hands reached out, what he touched wasn't fabric but feverish skin. Those hands immediately shrank back. Shilian himself felt burnt by the boy's hot hands. And only then did he remember he tore off his upper robes earlier in the midst of madness. Men naked from the waist up usually didn't mean anything except under certain circumstances. It was a little more awkward. But there was no need to highlight that awkwardness. They just needed to do what they must. The boy seemed to realize it too, and he didn't wait for Shilian to say anything before he reached out again. Circling his arm around Shilian's bare shoulders to help him up, he then immediately let go. He leaned against the wall of the tunnel, and with his back pressed against the cool rock, he felt some relief. "Wait, don't go out yet." "Cut off a lock of my hair. I have need for it." He acknowledged the order and reached out again, but nothing could be seen clearly in the darkness. His long locks were cleanly tied behind his back, so his first contact wasn't Shilian's hair. Instead, he accidentally felt the skin of Shilian's chest, soft and supple with sheen of gleaming sweat. He was already in torment, and that boy had touched somewhere sensitive. It was as if a jolt of electricity shocked through his torso. "Oh no." "What are they doing in there? So embarrassing. I daren't listen." Oh, the boy immediately dropped his hands at the sound of Shilian's fury, afraid to make any more contact. Shilian obviously wasn't furious at him. In his eyes, that little soldier was nothing more than a child. He softened his tone, thinking the boy was probably scared of offending him. "Don't panic. Continue. Don't mind him." The boy croaked, "Yes, sir." Oh, God. But he didn't seem to be panicking. feeling everywhere he shouldn't, and every time he found he had touched the wrong place, his hands would shrink back. In the end, he could only trace his hands up Shilian's chest to find his hair, flaring unspeakable pleasure and agony in Shilian. Such misery. Shilian longed to smash his head against the tunnel wall and just pass out for good. Finally, the boy felt Shilian's Adam's apple, behind his neck, grasping for a lock of hair. With only a few strands in his grip, he carefully cut with the sword. Your Highness, it's done. Give me your hand. The boy heeded, and from his hands, Shilian retrieved those long, thin strands and tied them into a knot onto a random finger of that boy's hand. Oh my God, you're joking, the red string of fate. The boy was baffled and asked in a quivering voice, Your Highness, what is this? The flower demon's poison is about to enter a second stage. I need to borrow your sword. If anything wants to harm you later, just raise this hand and it can protect you. Now leave. Blocking us outside like this while you went yourself, little buddy, you're not very nice. At the same time, Shilian could feel more strength surging in his limbs. He sucked in a deep breath, grabbed the worn sword that the young soldier left behind with his right hand. He steadied his spirit, raised the sword, and made a cut on his left arm. In the flash, it was like a fog had lifted and his senses refreshed. Notes. In the traditional wedding ritual of spouses cutting off a lock of their own hair, then intertwining and tying them together. The spouses cut off their hair together, symbolizing till death do us part. Shilian cutting off a lock of his hair to tie around Hua Chong's finger might be as inconsequential as Long Wanji biting Wei Wuxian's arm, but it's a point of interest anyway, knowing MXTX. Obviously, Hua Chong thought more of it than Shilian did, since he tied the red string of fate onto his finger later. Exactly! Yes! Yes! I was just gonna say, yep, we're gonna go back to that. He knew it. Blood streamed down Shilian's left arm, but it was like he had finally grasped a lifeline amidst the chaos. The fragrance of the land of tinder could aggravate one's temper and arouse deep, slumbering urges. Typically, the stronger the repressed urge, the stronger the rebound after taking in the fragrance. As for what Shilian repressed deep down, taking lust away, there was only the urge to kill left. This urge to kill couldn't be in reference to monsters or demons. He'd slain so much evil in the past, so it didn't count as any sort of repression. The target must be killed, must be human or a god in order to inflict a sense of transgression. Before entering the cave, Shilian cut himself in order to draw the erase, so blood was spilt. It was somewhat effective against the tender fragrance because injuring himself was also a form of inflicting harm. Why are we having more self-harm, Shilian? Damn it, MXTX. No! At the end of the day, lust and murder were both extremely aggressive desires, and Shilian had even heard that some thought the nature of both were one and the same. Then using himself as proof, we're going to talk about that in the discussion. Using himself as proof, there was indeed an alternative method to pass the current trial. Sure of his own reasoning, he cut another line on his left arm without hesitation, and each cut brought more clarity to his mind. He was just rejoicing and didn't realize the tender fragrance was stirring more evil within his body. When that urge to kill was satisfied, instantly another wave of pleasure would pour throughout his person. That sudden surge of pleasure coursed through him from head to toe, easily breaking the wall of defense he painstakingly built. And by the time Shilian realized it, he was already quietly moaning. If it wasn't only him inside the cave, Shilian wouldn't be able to believe the sound came from him. This method should have worked, so why would this happen? He glanced at the sword and suddenly remembered the young soldier had cut down the stems of those flowers and had struck the humanoid flower demons. It was covered in the sap of the land of the tinders. He had only used 20% of his power to make the first cut on his arm, and the same relieving effect can only be achieved if he used 30% of his power to cut. Wasn't this no different than drinking poison to quench thirst? Oh, damn it. Madness must have gone to his head. Otherwise, he should have realized this and noticed it. He cursed himself mentally, but since the act had already been done, he could only rip off a piece of his left sleeve to wipe crazily at the sword, then tear off his right sleeve to stuff it in his own mouth, biting down mullishly and do his best to restrain himself. That damned quiet moan continued to escape through his bitten lips and gritted teeth intermittently. However, voices echoed within the caves, and every small sound was amplified and reverberated outwards. The boy heeded his instructions and covered his eyes, using only his sense of hearing to work, and his ears became more sensitive. There was no reason to think that he noticed nothing. Your Highness, to be in such an unspeakable state was the biggest shame of his life. Shilian could hardly imagine what would happen if anyone would see him right now. Even submerged in darkness, he could not tolerate the thought, "Don't come in." However, that piece of cloth was still stuffed in his mouth, so his command only sounded like muffled whimpering, exceedingly pitiful and wretched. Hearing him, the young soldier became even more agitated. Ah, damn it, no! Okay. Go one more chapter, y'all. Oh my god. Okay, so Land of the Tinder, body of gold hard pressed against desire 4. Trigger warning, graphic self-harm. MXTX. Oh no. Shilian's left arm was bleeding profusely from the gash he created on himself. But at the end of the day, it was only self-harm, not murder, so the urge wasn't fully fulfilled. His mouth slackened and that stuffed piece of cloth fell from his lips. He became more aggressive and stabbed his left leg. It was a deep cut and the sound of the blade penetrating the flesh was clear. He ran towards him. Hearing his hurried footsteps, he backed away in terror. Even pressed against the wall, he continued to push backwards. No, don't come near me, don't! The second blood barrier by the entrance of the cave was drawn, especially for Shilian to bar himself, but it couldn't bar the boy, so he still had a chance to return to safety. But the Tinder fragrance poison was about to enter the second stage. If that boy approached, he could very well end his life right then and there and spare him no chance to escape. He was terrified he'd kill that child by accident and could only avoid him. Your Highness, the urge to kill was boiling in his blood. A voice inside of his head screamed, I won't die, I won't die, I won't die. The next moment, in a split decision, the blade turned. Oh. In that moment, the young soldier could see a flash of cold light. The sword had struck and it penetrated Shilian's own stomach, nailing himself dead onto the ground. Oh my god! A sharp pain exploded from his abdomen, spreading throughout his whole body, dispersing the heat. His hands were gripping tightly onto the hilt, his eyes bulging. He choked a cough. A thin thread of blood flowed from the side of his lips. His breathing stagnated, and he stopped moving. The young soldier was dumbfounded and fell to his knees next to his body. Just then there was screeching and shrieking outside the cave. Who are you? The voices of the flower demons were delicate but shrill, and their shrieks piercing to the ears. What the hell? Oh, Feng Xin! It's the Land of the Tinder. If you don't want to get poisoned, then cover your face. Mooching already had his face covered. Feng Xin covered his face, but then seemed to have seen something and muffled an angry shout. Your Highness! What is this? What a disgraceful sight. But his tone wasn't as angry as Feng Xin's. More like the reaction of having heard someone utter a bad joke. Oh, of course Mooching was like this. What is this? Shilian laid inside the cave and couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could guess that those flower demons were probably showed their naked selves before them, looking highly inappropriate. Feng Xin! Hurry and burn them! Don't let anyone else see! Oh no! The shrieks and curses of those flower demons gradually disappeared. Make sure to burn them thoroughly. I was about to say, that fragrance from those flower demons is poisonous. If there's any leftover seedlings, they'll come back. Your Highness, are you in there? Oh, I don't want them to get the wrong idea with Hua Chong. I'm here. It was weaker than normal. The two of them rushed over. However, there was a very familiar raised ball by Shilian and knew how to break them. Okay. Who's there? It's just a little soldier. Oh. The two dropped their guard and entered. The bright firelight brightened the entire cave with a warm orangey glow and illuminated Shilian, who laid there on the ground, his long hair strewn about, his robes shredded, and a long sword impaled through his abdomen, nailing him to the ground. The two were horrified by the sight. Who did this? Me. What happened? I don't want to talk about it. This only happened because there was no other way. Hurry and free me from this. He pulled the sword with a frown, throwing it aside with a clang, and the young soldier retrieved it. Feng Xin helped Shilian sit up, covered him with an outer robe, and only then did Shilian finally recount roughly the ghastly night with the Land of the Tinder. You guys came faster than I expected. Where's Qirong? He got locked up by the king in the palace. He's too overbearing in the markets, so of course he was an easy target. but he knew to find us after he got back, so not too bad. So it seemed that as much as Qirong despised those two servants, he still acknowledged how competent they were. The two had planned to have one stay behind and the other guard the fortress, but Qirong was screaming and howling with a sword smeared in Shilian's blood, so they thought that the danger might be more than they expected, and decided to both come together in the end. Basie Hill was thick with the essence of evil, so it wasn't hard to find, which was why they were so quick in coming. Although Shilian possessed an ascended body, normal blades could not hurt his essence, and a jab to himself like this wouldn't kill him. Still, he had never really truly lost in a battle of life and death in his 20 years. This was the first time he'd gotten so heavily wounded, so he needed time to recover. Function carried him on his back on their return to the royal capital. Foreign pain stabbed him from his stomach, making Shilian furrow his brows, and he tried to control himself. "Did you guys bump into anything on your way here?" "No." "Be careful, there are inhuman creatures about." He wanted to tell him about the white cloth being, but because he really was quite exhausted, and seeing from his peripheral of his vision the young soldier falling behind with that bloody steel sword in his hand, he finally relaxed, closed his eyes to restore his energy, and fell deeply asleep. Since he had capriciously descended into the mortal realm, Shilian had not closed his eyes to rest for over a month. With stacking pressure growing, this whole ordeal finally crushed him, and he was comatose for 3 whole days. After 3 days, he woke with a start and found himself inside his bedchamber. The ceiling above was glamorous and beautiful. It was the palace, and he immediately sat up. "Feng Shen, Your Highness, was I knocked out for a long time? Did anything happen?" His stomach injury had long since healed. "Relax, it was only for a few days. There were no enemy attacks. If there were, wouldn't I have already woken you up? Go back to bed. You forgot your shoes again." "Where's Mu Qing?" "I'm here." However, even though we didn't battle in the past few days, we did find something out. "Find something out? Didn't we say before there's something off with Yong'an? That there might be reinforcements? We went to scout Basie Hill and saw several people that were dressed like our citizens but had a weird accent. They didn't look like they were from Shanla. I captured them, and sure enough, there are other kingdoms supporting them from the shadows, secretly shipping supplies and arms. Otherwise, with so many people of Yong'an squished on a barren hill, there was no way they could support themselves until now, surviving on wild roots and weeds alone." Function cussed. "Effing fakers pretend to be all friendly. Gotta stir shit up now, hoping Shanla would fall completely into chaos." I love that. I would expect of all people Mu Qing to be the one that curses, but really he doesn't. It's Feng Shen. The kingdom of Shanla possessed a vast territory with bountiful resources, its wealth abundant, its production of precious jewels plentiful, and the nearby kingdoms had long watched with eyes green with envy. Shilian had expected this and shook his head gravely. He recalled something else and asked, "Where's that child?" "Which one?" "Oh, the little soldier? We were rushing you to the Goshi that day. No one cared for him. He probably went back to his troop." Shilian lowered his arms and sat down with poise on the bed. "That child was pretty skilled. I think he's got really good potential with a saber. If he's taught well, he'd definitely be spectacular when he's older. Mu Qing, remember to find him for me when you get a chance. Settle him well. He could be appointed." Shilian was someone who loved those who were skilled in martial arts, and just had to appoint them to his side just so he could watch them every day and soak in delight. This wasn't the first time he'd made such a comment, but it was the first time it was directed to a child. Mu Qing heard him make those really good potential with a saber, spectacular when he's older, remarks, and his expression turned unreadable. He scrunched up the hairband he just untied from Shilian with his hand and turned to throw it to the side. Feng Shen, on the other hand, remarked, "That brat only looked to be about 14 or 15. Isn't that too young? What's he going to do after getting appointed?" Mu Qing spoke up too in a flat voice. "It's not proper. It'd be against military rule." "A god can descend into the mortal realm, so what can military rule do to me?" Shilian said. Then he praised. "You guys should have seen the way he killed those Binu. It was so good." Speaking of Binu, that strange white-clothed being flashed before his mind. "Your Highness, why have demons like those Land of the Tenders appeared on Basie Hill? That's never happened before." That's what I wanted to tell you guys on that day. Finally free, he recounted his meeting with that one who bore the cry-smiling mask. The three of them talked it over but didn't dare to be negligent. They decided that in the end, it was better to report it to the heavens. Thus, once Shilian left his bedchamber, he met briefly with the king and queen before hurrying to the great martial hall on Mount Tai Sang. Okay! If this was the past, Shilian would have gone to the heavenly court directly to tell Junwoo face to face. Yet circumstances had changed. He was the one who had deserted the heavenly court, and this was like handing the keys back. Even if he wanted to go back, the doors would be locked. Plus, he'd left with such an upset and spoke with such friction in the great martial hall that he was a little embarrassed to face Junwoo. Thus, with great reverence, he lit a few giant sticks of incense in the great martial hall and passed on the message to the divine statue of the heavenly martial emperor, hoping he would hear it. However, the number of incense respects Junwoo received were at least 8,000 to 10,000, an overwhelming amount, with a number of big believers mixed in. Whether he would really hear his message would depend entirely on chance. Shilian didn't dare leave things be for too long either, and immediately returned to the battlefront to continue his watch over the fortress city. Maybe it was because the damage inflicted in the first battle was too great, and their reinforcements had been cut off secretly by Fengchen and Muqing, but Yong'an seemed to have changed tactics and didn't recklessly attack again. After a few months, they fought a few small battles, but didn't lose too gravely. Compared to the first battles, these bouts were nothing. That strange white-cloth being didn't appear again either. Thus, the royal capital of Shanla was growing slack, and Shilian himself found a rare chance to leave from the front lines, strolling through the royal capital to relax a bit. Oh. He stepped onto a small stone bridge, stirring long twines of weeping willow next to a bridge. He watched lively red koi fish swish their tails, swimming happily through the coursing waters below, feeling envious. He was lost in thought for a while when suddenly he felt eyes staring at him from behind, and when he turned his head, there was no one there. Puzzled but not sensing any malintent or killing intent, Shilian didn't mind. After crossing the bridge, he strolled along the martial deity avenue, and passerby on the road bowed to him excitedly or reverently or delightedly, greeting, "Your Highness." Shilian nodded and smiled, and after walking a while, he felt that staring gaze on his back again. This time he took it to heart and whipped around without warning, catching the culprit. Behind the willow tree there was a flash of a shadow. He walked and was about to grab at the person when he realized with a start that it was the boy, with his head wrapped in bandages. Even with the bandages wrapped all over his head, the boy still raised his crossed arms to cover his face, leaving only a bright eye peeking through the patched sleeves. "Your Highness, I didn't mean to." "You're from that night." He trailed off, recalling immediately what exactly had transpired that night many months before, and just how decomposed he was. Images filled his mind, and he reddened, feeling slightly awkward, and hurried to clear his throat. "So it was you. I was going to look for you a while back, but with so much on my plate, I'd forgotten. Aren't you a soldier in the army? Why are you in the city?" The boy was taken aback and replied, a little mopingly, "I'm not in the army anymore." "Why not?" I got kicked out." "Your Highness, did you not know?" "Know what?" He clearly told Muqing that the child was a good sprout, to be settled and appointed, so how did he get kicked out of the army after Shilian's specific instructions? That boy looked to be excited and happy, immediately dropping his arm. "So your Highness hadn't known. I thought... Shilian was becoming more and more curious. "Come, tell me, why did you get kicked out? Who kicked you out? Why'd you think I would know? Also, what had you thought?" The boy made a giant step towards him, but before he could speak, damn it, there came a loud, horrified scream down Martial Deity Avenue. Shilian whipped his head around and saw a man holding his face, running and stumbling in his direction. "Oh, damn it! No! Oh!" It's time for cup 2 of coffee and to talk about this. Why should I be surprised at this point? Because these 4 chapters that went surprisingly quick, they had nothing to do with Bai Wusheng, nothing to do with Long Ying, nothing to do with really anything except Shilian going into heat in a cave. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. There was a lot more to it than that. And Muqing is suspicious. Quite suspicious, right? Muqing is very, very interesting and suspicious at this point. And I have theories. And I have thoughts. But again, we are connecting We are connecting things from the past to the present. There were a lot of things that when I went back and reread and took notes, I was like, oh, I did not catch that in the reaction. We need to talk about that. And there's just lots of little weird things. MXTX loves to sprinkle little tiny crumbs of theoretical things that maybe will bear fruit as this chapter goes through. Maybe will bear fruit later. Maybe they won't. You'll find out eventually. And that's kind of what's so great about this story, is that there are a lot of things I hate to compare with Modao Zushi, because this is a completely different story than Modao Zushi. It could not be more different. And I love that about MXTX. She's not writing the same thing twice. It's a totally different story. But I would say it's a different type of mystery. It just is. There's no way else to say it. And even though the author's notes in this kind of make a little allusion to Wei Wuxian and the bite on his arm, that being a thing, it's just something totally different. But what I love about this story is that at some point, we're going to find out if the little crumbs that MXTX has given us in this chapter are going to do anything, or if they're not going to do anything. And please don't tell me. Please don't. I'm going to posit some theories, as always, that will probably go nowhere. They'll probably not be anything at all. All I ask is that do not tell me, Romania, that's not going to happen. Don't worry. Don't say that. Let me find out later. And if I end up being like, oh, I guess it went nowhere, I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that. But I just don't want to know. I want to say my theories, think out loud, and then you all can cackle behind your newly reheated coffee mugs, because making 2 cups of coffee, I needed to reheat this sucker. And then you'd be like, ha, Romania, you're wrong. And I'm fine with that. So, but yeah, I made very concise notes, because these chapters were nothing like I expected. I was like, should I have waited till Valentine's Day to have read this? I am happy, though. My one concern throughout this entire set of chapters, and I'm not going to lie, because I've read enough BL, my mind went there. My mind went there, and I know my dog's barking. My mind went there, and I've read enough BL, especially some very bonkers BL, to know that it was likely to happen. But I was very afraid that Shilian was going to try to do something to Hua Chong. I was very afraid. And I know that most of you are thinking, oh, that wouldn't have happened. And I'm like, I have seen things in Modao Zushi I can't unsee. I put nothing past MXTX. Nothing. I was just worried, because Hua Chong, even though we established in the last set of chapters, he looks like he's 15 or 16, he is still a 13-year-old boy. And I'm glad that the flower demons at least were like, he knows nothing. And I'm like, good. Hua Chong is at a young, impressionable age where he doesn't understand anything about sexuality. That is good. Good little Hua Chong, little innocent boy. Although, we're going to make some notes about some things that I'm sure some things stuck around after these chapters. But I'm really, really thankful that MXTX was classy enough to not have Shilian do anything to Hua Chong. One, not try to do anything sexual with him. Very glad that happened. And 2, didn't kill him, because when we get to this point in the notes, there's a brief moment reading where I was like, is Hua Chong going to be the one that kills, is Shilian going to be the one that kills Hua Chong? Is that what's going to be the catalyst to this? Thank God it's not. My mind went there for a hot second. I was like, oh no. But, so Bai Wuxiang's not in these chapters at all. He is just, he's there in spirit. He is him. Ah, how creepy, but we'll talk about that. We might as well talk about it, right? Okay, so I'm going to put theory time over here. Going to put theory time over here and kind of like just put that there. Leave it there for the moment. And Huckleberry's going to be very mad at me, but I'm not playing with him right now. We've got to talk about about Heaven of Vigil's Blessing. The Modao Zushi reference in these chapters got me thinking about it. And then we need to talk about... what else can we talk about? I had it in mind here about connections. Yes. Connections from past to present. There are several of those in here. I want to talk about them. There are a lot of those. But we're just going to... And then I'm going to put sneaky MXTX things over here. This is the sneaky MXTX corner. Sneaky MXTX corners over here where she's like a little gremlin laughing at our demise as we lose our minds, as we collectively lose ourselves over these chapters, like Shilian almost lost himself as well. But yeah, so the land of the tinder, man, I do like the explanation of Chinese folklore and the idea that the land of the tinder is kind of a trope. I do like that explanation that MXTX kind of makes it her own. And she's like, okay, my land of the tinder is going to be this red flower. I think it's interesting to note about the red flower, the crimson rain sought flower, that with flowers have been something that's very prevalent in this story so far. You have the white flower that represents Shilian, and kind of this purity, right? This purity and chasteness and like abstinence. And he's just a very like, I am this pure being, right? Then you have the idea of the red or crimson flower that refers to several things. It refers to Hua Chong, and it also refers to, there's like so far 3 different things it refers to. It refers to the umbrella. I think that's the main reference, is it refers to the umbrella left for him by Shilian, connecting back to him, telling him to live for me. It also connects to the idea of blood, which could be tied to battle, which we're starting to see, but I suspect we're going to see more of as this series continues. But it also connects to lust and love. And we get a little bit of that with the red crimson flower that is with the land of the tinder. And so I thought that was really interesting that you have those 3 like things connecting. And even though Hua Chong is not old enough to really understand love and sexuality at this point, I think by the end of these chapters, there's going to be dots connecting later on when puberty's, done. His voice croaks at one point in these chapters, and I can only think of like his voice like cracking as he's getting older. It's like, poor Hua Chong, like poor babe. But yeah, so the land of the tinder, the red flower that emits a fragrance to make men impetuous, and it feeds off the essence of men and their blood. I love the idea of it, just this flower demon is a seductress, and it just like gets men like lustful and crazy and makes them go crazy, either to kill or to be passionate. And Shilian does not need his followers or devotees to find out he's been in this impure state, because that's kind of part of his thing. But before we even get to that, Shilian geeking out about swords. Connections to the past. We have Shilian gushing on swords, and then we think back to Paradise Manor. And the idea that Shilian is kind of the catalyst. Shilian's the catalyst for a lot of things in this set of chapters, but catalyst for Ming. For Ming's creation. Because honestly, if Shilian hadn't told Hua Chong that he would be good with a scimitar, Ming may not even exist. Shilian kind of, in some weird way, created the catalyst for that happening. And the funny thing is that Feng Xin and Mu Qing are kind of told this, but they're not specifically told about a scimitar. That's the thing. I feel like Feng Xin and Mu Qing are smart enough, if they were trying to figure out Hua Chong's origins, then you would think maybe they could put 2 and 2 together and realize that the kid that was obsessed about him years ago, during the same time as Qirong and all that, would maybe be connected. But that's a big leap, right? We, the audience, have seen enough evidence to make that leap, but not Mu Qing and Feng Xin. I think the leap would have been easier to be made if they knew that Shilian had been recommending him use a scimitar. And I don't think he says anything about that. I want to go back real quick to chapter 3, the 4th chapter in this, and said he was skilled. He'd be good with a saber. Okay, so he does tell them that. So, interesting. He does tell them that. But again, we, the audience, have had like up to now 2.5 volumes to make the wild assumptions of knowing that it's pretty easy to see the connections between Hua Chong and, Hong Hong. But for them, it's a little bit harder. But yeah, he's kind of the catalyst for all of that. Just geeking out about swords. And the big thing about this is that there's been several references that no one listens to Shilian. He's talked about his devotees not listening. The heavenly realm doesn't listen to him. Feng Xin and Mu Qing listen to him, but they kind of berate him. His parents kind of do the same. Hua Chong is the only one that listens without question and follows Shilian's instructions. Like, he's the only one that is like, on the same wavelength and takes everything Shilian says to heart. Because he talks about how he's geeked out before about swords and no one really listened or cared. They're just like, oh, Crown Prince, oh, that's cool. Kind of like if you're gushing about something that you're really passionate about and, you know, you're listening and somebody's listening and they're not really into it either and they're just like, oh, that's cool, nice. But Hua Chong, he listens. He gets his notebook out, takes notes, and like listen to everything he says. Again, and so Shilian, this is interesting. Shilian assumes that Long Ying is working with Bai Wusheng, that this is all a big elaborate plot by Yongin. I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Shilian's theory is that Long Ying is working with Bai Wusheng, and when he first stumbles across the land of the Tinder, that he thinks that Long Ying, he sacrificed his people to create a trap for Shilian. I don't think that's the case. I think that Bai Wusheng, because they make a statement about Bai Wusheng, and I think this is really important to note. Bai Wusheng is not a direct fighter. Hell no. Bai Wusheng works from the shadows. He is not noble in any way. Bai Wusheng is not the noble swordsman that is going to... He's not going to do a Long Chan Chu, challenge you to a duel, and be like, I will meet you on top of the hill at XYZ time and we will fight to the death. Hell no. Bai Wusheng's like, why would I do that? He's like, I could be much more successful if I'm tricky. He's a schemester, right? I feel like Qirong wants to be a schemer, but he's not good at it, right? Qirong is way too crass, and it does not have the patience or tenacity or the temper to be a schemer. Bai Wusheng has like a Joker schemer mentality. He's like, work smarter, not harder. I'm not going to sit here and challenge you directly. No. Which is going to be interesting to see Jun Woo face him later. I really hope we get something on that. I hope the MXTX details the battle between Bai Wusheng and Jun Woo. That would be very interesting. Bai Wusheng, I feel maybe not incredibly physically strong, but has like enough spiritual intimidation and resources to be scary. Maybe, does that make sense? But I don't think that Long Ying is working directly with Bai Wusheng. I don't think so. I think that Long Ying, my theory is that Long Ying and Yongin did accept outside help, right? Because they realize they can't do it on their own. So I feel like Long Ying and the Yongins, they did accept outside help from other kingdoms, and they started to get in more resources and supplies from them. I do think that they did that. I think Bai Wusheng just dropped by and was like, oh, what is all this mess? This looks fun. I think I'm going to just invite myself into the situation and make it worse. Because he's a supreme ghost. That's what they do, right? And so I think that Bai Wusheng just saw an opportunity to dive in and make matters more chaotic than they already were. And Long Ying's just caught up in the middle of it. I don't think Long Ying's working with Bai Wusheng. Now, the whole thing with Bai Wusheng, like saving Long Ying, I think, like I said in the reaction, that Bai Wusheng has realized, oh, you could be really powerful. You hate Yongin. You have a lot of hatred in your heart. I can work with that. Let's just feed on that, shall we? And I think he just wanted to save Long Ying because he viewed him as somebody that he could use later. That's what I think. I don't think Long Ying really knew Bai Wusheng. I don't think he has anything to do with him. And then the whole Land of the Tinder thing, we established that Bai Wusheng brought that in himself. Well, this is the thing. The big question, is Bai Wusheng him? Is he? We don't know. Shilian makes those assumptions, but Shilian's making a lot of assumptions in this chapter that I'm like, we don't know. That's the really fun thing. Is he him? The obvious answer is, oh yeah, he is him. He is him equals Bai Wusheng. That is the obvious answer, but this is MXTX we're talking about. So we don't know. It could be somebody else. It could be someone from the heavenly realm. Who knows? It could be, the heavenly realm is just like, we're going to make... I said back, like, way early on that the heavenly realm could be punishing Shilian for arrogantly disregarding the rules and said, here's your punishment. We're going to make things go from bad to worse. Do I think that they sicked Bai Wusheng on Shilian? No. I think Bai Wusheng was already around, saw an opportunity, and was like, got this. But I don't know. I think it's so fascinating that we as the audience, we're so scared of Bai Wusheng and he's so terrifying. It's instantly understandable for us to assume that he is him. But we don't know if that's not established. The flowers never confirm that it's Bai Wusheng or the White Calamity. They don't even say the words white. They don't say the words ghost. They don't say anything. They just say he is him and he brought us here. That's all we're led to believe. We don't know who he is. So I do think it's Bai Wusheng, but if there's like going to be a rug pulled out from under us moment and we find out someone else sicked the flowers there, that's going to be interesting. And I'm going to be really excited if I'm going to be happy if it is Bai Wusheng that he is him, because it's so scary and sinister, and it's like, it just adds that level of like creepy to it that's like, they don't even want to say his name. They don't want to speak it. They're so scared of him. It's like, ugh, that's so good. But if it turns out to be a really big surprise moment that it's not Bai Wusheng, I'm going to be like, MXTX, cool. But I think it works either way. But still, we're going to put it there. But I do not think that Long Ying is working with Bai Wusheng. I think Long Ying is a victim of circumstance. I think Long Ying is like Shilian. He has this strong sense of justice, and he wants to protect his people. That's the whole thing. We've just spent the last several chapters establishing how he is so much like Shilian. He wants to save his people no matter what. But the thing of it is, Shilian is like, would he sacrifice his people to trap him? That brings up a really good question, because that kind of alleviates some guilt off of Shilian if that were the case. I feel like in some regards, we're going to put this down here, Shilian is trying to justify his and the king's actions through Long Ying. I feel like he's trying to say, well, my father and I, we've sacrificed the people of Yongin. He got really mad in the last several chapters when Qirong was like, civilians versus soldiers, it doesn't matter. You're killing your own people. And that was like the most clairvoyant moment that Qirong's ever had. And Shilian got really pissed about it because it's true. And so I feel like Shilian is trying to almost not scapegoat Long Ying, but almost trying to justify his father and his actions against Yongin by saying, well, Long Ying was sacrificing his own people to trap me, so what we're doing, it's just eye for an eye, right? But I don't think that's the case. I don't think Long Ying is working with Bai Wusheng. I think that he's been working with other people coming in to give them resources, but I don't think Long Ying even knows about the White Calamity. And maybe if he turns out to be the Blackwater, that's why he kind of becomes a recluse. He's like, I don't want anything to do with anybody. Because maybe he feels the same way that Shilian felt, that was like, I couldn't save any of my people, so here I am as a ghost. What am I to do? I'm just going to stay by myself, but I'm going to be strong enough that you're not going to stop me, right? He seems to have that mentality. He's like, I'm going to be a strong supreme ghost that nobody can stop. Kind of like Hua Chong. But Hua Chong has a purpose. It's Shilian. It seems like Yongling wouldn't. So if he turns out to be the Blackwater and just went into a reclusive state, it would make sense to me. I don't know. I'm still on my Long Ying is Blackwater theory, and I will probably be proven woefully wrong. I'm fine with it. But that's where I am now. Don't confirm or deconfirm. But yeah, so that's so interesting. He sacrificed, that Long Ying, he's convinced he sacrificed his people for victory, like what Shilian and his dad has. So that's so fascinating. Of course, though, here's the thing, too. The thing about this that's so interesting is that Shilian is his own worst enemy. That's such apparent in these chapters. He's his own worst enemy. And that is shown several times. But he tries to find reasoning why it's not the case, right? And I say that because he makes the comment about the medicine later. Like, here we have a few different things that happen. He uses the whole bottle on the woman. We'll talk about that. Him going alone. We'll talk about that. And everything that happens in the cave, right, was his own idea. Okay. So the whole thing with the woman using the whole bottle of medicine, she dies anyway. In true fashion, as has been the theme with Shelian this entire time. It doesn't matter. She still ends up dying. It's like everything was for nothing, right? But here's the thing. MXTX in that whole segment, I couldn't read it out loud because I was like, this is disgusting. Like, she goes into great detail of how, like, the woman's innards are spilt out on the ground. She's clearly going to die. She's, like, nearly cleaved in half. They're, like, feasting on her body. The Binu are. It's like, she is not going to live. Clearly. But what does Shelian do? He takes out the whole bottle of medicine, the one bottle he has that he could use on anybody else, and he uses it all on this woman that is clearly not going to live. And that feels like a big symbolic representation of this whole mess. It's like Mu Qing, Junwoo, everybody has told Shelian, the Goshi, everybody, they've been like, you can't salvage this. It's not gonna work. You're putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. It's not gonna work, and you don't have the ability to save this situation. But Shelian, through his pride, through his resolve, he thinks that he can. And so just like how he's pouring all of his resources into something that's going to die, he pours the whole bottle onto the woman that still ends up dying. And the funny thing is, she ends up dying because of something he didn't even think of. So the whole flower of the tinder hadn't even crossed his mind. And the blood, I love that MXTX uses, like, he didn't realize it was the flower of the tinder because of all the blood everywhere, masking the color of the crimson flower, so he didn't notice it. The stench of the blood masked the fragrance. It's like he doesn't see this whole thing is a giant symbol of the fall of Shanla. There's stuff he can't even see until it's too late. We've seen that in the last several chapters. He's just had revelation after revelation that he didn't see coming. But the thing about it is, it's his own fault that he uses the whole bottle of medicine. He didn't have to, but he did. Him going off alone, he thinks later on that all of this has been fabricated by Yongin and Long Ying to lure him out there. And yes, I do think that they kidnapped Qi Rong to lure Shelian out there. And I think that they did maybe account for the fact that he would go alone because he's a martial god, because he wanted to save the people, didn't want to get them involved. But the funny thing is, at the end of the day, it was still Shelian's choice. He could have told the soldiers about what was going on. He could have drugged them all there to get Qi Rong. It would have made the situation a lot worse. Yeah, it wouldn't have been a good choice. But at the end of the day, it is still his choice. He did choose to go alone, right? He chose to go alone to do this task and not bring Mu Qing and Feng Xin with him. He could have done that, but he didn't. He could have even chose not to go entirely alone. He could have brought his 2 deputies with him, but he doesn't do it. And then everything happening in the cave, all the self-harm, which, oh my God, all the self-harm, he doesn't realize, and you can blame it on the mania, the flower, whatever. I think that was definitely fogging his judgment. But all the self-harm, everything, is all his own design. And it connects back that it's just so frustrating because all of the self-harm in the cave connects to his self-sacrificing later on in the story, in the rest of the 800 years. And it's like, Shelian, quit hurting yourself. And that's like what I wanted to scream the whole time in the cave. Like, it makes sense why it's happening, and it makes sense Shelian's thought process. I'm like, oh, this sucks. But it's so frustrating because you're like, you just want to hug Shelian and keep him safe and protect this cinnamon bun deity, and it's like him having to impale himself. We'll get to that part, but that's just but yeah, this whole thing being a symbolism for the fall of Shanla, that he's his own worst enemy, that he just, all this was brought upon himself. It sucks. It sucks a lot. The flower demons were interesting. I don't know how the Dongwa would do them because they all are extremely vulgar, extremely lewd. extremely sexual. And I was like, oh God, even reading it, I was like, I tried not to get like too into it because I was like, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. They remind me a lot of Alice in Wonderland. If you've ever read Alice in Wonderland, there are flowers in that series, and they're all like just petty bitches. And they get on to Alice, they're like, you're not a pretty flower, and they like all just chide her the entire time. That's what this chapter reminded me of. It reminded me of the flowers from Alice in Wonderland talking and being, they don't form naked women though that come after you in a cave, so there are some distinct copyright differences. But they're very interesting. And bless his heart, thank God Hua Chong doesn't get it. Hua Chong's like, deflowering virgins, what's happening? Levels, what's happening? I'm like, thank God poor Hua Chong is not completely severed of his innocence. But we'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, so everything is set up as Shilian thinks to lure him into this scene. And maybe it is. Maybe it is. It's very clever if that is true. But I also kind of like the idea that Shilian assumes that everything was to set him up when really he kind of fell into the nest on his own. He fell into the devil's nest of his own accord. And maybe it's his bad luck. Maybe it's because he's with Hua Chong that the bad luck increased. We don't know. But it's fascinating, right? It's very fascinating. So chapter 81, I choose the whole concept of Shilian getting lustful and everything. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to throw it out here, say it. I'm just going to lay it here on the doorstep and y'all do whatever you want with it. For a split second, I was like, this is getting like Omegaverse stuff. For a hot second, I was like, is MXTX flirting around with it? But then she just kind of leaves it here and just lets it go. And I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad we didn't go the full route. But I was like, interesting. I am glad, thank God, that Hua Chong did not get affected in all of this. That has been my one saving grace. I was reading these chapters with such trepidation, being like, please, Hua Chong is 13. He's still a child. Do not hurt him too much. Although Hua Chong definitely is not going to be around any ladies after seeing all these demonic women throw themselves at him and torture him. So yeah, basically him making the barrier, that whole thing is rather interesting too. The idea of the barrier. The idea that the barrier, and we're going to go into theories here. I feel like it is a little sneaky of MXTX though, because she has the whole thing about Hua Chong wanting to use his blood. And Shilian ending up mixing it for the barriers. I feel like there's something with that. I don't know what to do with it, but I'm going to put a pin in it that both Hua Chong and Shilian's blood was this really strong barrier when it was mixed together. On the surface, it seems like Shilian was trying to just not insult Hua Chong when he used his blood. I feel like Hua Chong like cuts his arm. I also wondered if the arm that Hua Chong cut it on is the one that has the tattoo. I'm like, is that something there? Is that connected to it? Because I'm going to say, is the cut on Hua Chong connected to the tattoo on his arm? And then obviously the hair is tied to the red string of fate. I'm so glad y'all didn't spoil me on that. I'm so glad. The red string of fate is the hair that Shilian tied on to protect him more. Yeah, that's great. I wondered if the cut on his arm is maybe connected to the tattoo. We'll see. But I feel like it's interesting that on the surface, it seems like Hua Chong, after he cut his arm, Shilian was like, no, you need like a heavenly official's blood to make the strong barrier. But I wondered if maybe the barrier was so strong, not just because it was Shilian's blood, but because it was the blood of someone so devoted to him mixed in. And if MXTX is going to do anything with that in the future. It felt very Modao Zushi when the blood, there's a scene, I don't want to spoil it, but y'all know, the red robe scene towards the climax of that series. It reminded me of that a little bit. And that blood mixing together between the two of them. I don't know if there's anything to it. It seems like something a little sneaky MXTX is just foreshadowing with. We'll pin it back for later. But yeah, he ends up setting up the barriers. I like the idea that he made the barriers to where he can't get out, nothing can get in, and there's a little, it felt like Phantom Menace Star Wars, where there's that little gap where Hua Chong can get stuck at, and he can go back in with Shilian if he wants, but he doesn't need to go out and be attacked by the flower demons, right? So mixes it with his own, makes a space in the barriers. But yeah, Shi Lian just trying to get away from the flowers, and the flowers forming the women to tempt Shi Lian. And Shi Lian, he seems to be doing all right. He's like seems to be at his worst when he's cutting himself, right, and trying to keep Hua Chong from coming to him. But Shi Lian, from being someone that's never had a moment's thought of anything impure as anything sexual, is suddenly tempted in this moment by this flower demon and its power, right? And Hua Chong is just there striking down. The image of Hua Chong, this 13-year-old kid, stabbing these naked women and killing them to keep them from attacking Shi Lian. It's a visual. I don't know how the Donghua will be able to do it. But I want to make note that even though Hua Chong has heard nothing or doesn't seem to understand anything about this sexual encounter that's happening in this, there are moments, and I can't believe I'm writing this on Whiteboard Kun. Whiteboard Kun, I will cleanse you when we're done. But Shi Lian moaning and all of this imagery is something that is going to stay with Hua Chong for 800 years to come, right? And the reason I say that is because at the flowers, they start, like, Shi Lian's reciting the words of ethics, the Ethics Sutra, to calm him down, like saying like all his mantra and everything to himself. And the flowers, I didn't notice this in the reaction and was like, oh, but when I went back and reread it, the flowers are yelling at Hua Chong, being like, this is your chance, seize it now. Even if you dream for 800 years, you won't be able to have a taste. MXTX. How dare you? How freaking dare you? How dare you, ma'am? How dare you? Because, yeah, she's basically, I'm going to put up here, insinuating that Hua Chong still longs to be with Shi Lian in a way that is more than friendship. Yeah. And now that connects back to the whole thing at Paradise Manor, where Shi Lian was having the drink, the alcohol and everything, and being like, oh, well, I can have a little alcohol, that's fine, but no sex for me. And Hua Chong's like, really? Because one, Hua Chong's like, well, I know that you are capable, sir, because I've seen you in a cave writhing around. Know that it's in you somewhere. And he's like, and two, he's like, maybe I've been thinking about that all these years later. Maybe that imagery has not left my mind, sir. You've kept me going in more ways than you know. But also, I feel like Hua Chong, now it makes more sense, where in the present time, he's like, it's not that big of a deal. You know, he's like, cultivators can have sex. I'm just saying, not that I've fantasized about it as an adult. Not that I have, Shi Lian, but if you decide you want to, I feel like it all makes more sense now because of these scenes. Like, Hua Chong may have been blissfully unaware of what was happening when he was a kid, but since he's grown up, he's thought back on those days and was like, I honestly think, though, no matter your age, an event like that you would not forget. It seems like it would be seared into your memory, right? So that's so fascinating. I'm like, and the 800 years is just like a tease to us. Now I'm thinking of the Volume 4 cover and going, maybe we'll go back to that. Maybe we'll touch back on these chapters when we get to Volume 4. Don't tell me. I'm going to excitedly wait and see if we do. But Shi Lian, chapter 82, going through his most grueling ordeal. Fighting ghosts and demons, nothing. Warding off sexual advances and urges, the worst. For our demisexual Cinnabon Bun deity. And then he comes to this horrifying idea that if he cuts himself, maybe he can relieve he can get more clarity, which is a very disturbing thought, right? A very disturbing thought indeed. Before he does that, though, when he asked Hua Chong to come into the cave, he asked him to cut a piece of his hair off. And I was like, at first we called him into the cave. I'm like, I was not wanting Hua Chong to do it, because I was like, no, he specifically told you not to come. But then Shilian says that he's like, he was cursing the fact that he told him not to go, and he was like, no, it's fine. I've got this moment of clarity. Come in here. And he gives him the lock of hair as extra protection and ties it around his finger. And they make the comment in the novel that it's all about the wedding rituals and everything tied to that. Of course it is. And then, but as it's noted, it's like, it may just be something like the Lan Wangji biting Wuxian thing. It's just like a thing that becomes something else later on. That seems what the Red String of Fate is as well. But I want to make note, the whole time, connections from past to present, the whole time that Hua Chong is reaching to find the hair, he's like groping all over in the darkness, Shilian, and Shilian's like, affected by this flower of land of the tinder, and he's like getting a little turned on by it, and it's like, please find my hair. I don't want to be turned on, but I am. All I could think of taking notes was back to Banyu, where the tables completely turn and Shilian is reaching to check Hua Chong if it's him or not. Doing the exact same thing. Grabbing the Adam's apple, reaching the chest. He does the same motions to check that it's Hua Chong that Hua Chong was doing to find the hair on Shilian. It's the same thing, paralleled. I'm like, MXTX, what is this business? How dare you? Like, it's great. It's like he was reaching for him in the Banyu arc. And the idea, again, that Hua Chong has in his mind, this idea of Shilian, top cut open, bleeding, like moaning, figures out that the saps on the sword that he was using to cut himself were only amplifying it instead of helping. And it's like, which also could be a symbolic reference that something that he meant to heal was only hurting more. Again, tying back to this whole thing where he thought in his brain that was a solution, it was going to make things better, and then realized all too late that it was making things worse. And it's like, At this point, I do want to bring up the only image from this set of chapters. It's a great one. It's a really great one. But it's of Shilian in the cave. You can see the outline of the ghoulish women in the background, the demons in the background there, all outside the cave. But if you get close enough there, you see beautiful, beautiful Shilian with his top open and everything, with Hua Chong, hair everywhere, bandages, and he's giving him the hair wrapped around his finger. I wish, I definitely will have this on the thumbnail, but the way they draw Shilian, he looks absolutely gorgeous. So beautiful there with his hair disheveled, looking all flustered, and Hua Chong's like, I don't understand these feelings that I'm feeling, but... And that's the other thing, too. Hua Chong is never influenced by the women that are blooms because they're not Shilian. Hua Chong is Shilian sexual. Shilian is Hua Chong sexual. They are demi for each other, and it's wonderful. At one point, it's not really confirmed, but I thought maybe the flowers tried to make themselves look like Shilian to tempt him. At one point, that might not have been the case at all, but it seemed like it was, and that was the one time that Hua Chong hesitated, and then he gets really mad because he knows it's not Shilian, because Shilian's behind him, so he's just like, I'm gonna kill y'all, quit. But, oh my god. And then Shilian keeps cutting himself, getting worked up, and he warns Hua Chong not to come any closer. And at that point, I honestly thought for a hot second, I was like, is Shilian gonna accidentally kill him? And that's gonna be how he becomes a ghost? I thought it for a split second, and I was like, no, maybe not. And that doesn't end up happening, but I was really thinking about that. And instead, he ends up nailing himself to the ground by impaling him. And it is honestly terrifying, because there's a moment beforehand when Shilian has to scream to himself, I'm not gonna die. Because this is the first time Shilian has willfully killed himself or has felt death as an ascended god, right? So it's like the first quote unquote death as a heavenly official. And you compare it later to the Banyu arc, where he admits that he was just trampled and it was no big thing. So, like, he has to scream to himself because, you naturally have a survival instinct. Like, you don't intentionally want to kill yourself. You're like, oh, and Shilian has to scream to himself, you're not going to die. It's going to be fine. You're ascended. It's not going to kill you. He has to scream to himself and tell him to himself before he does it. And then later he's like, oh yeah, I got trampled. But it just happened. You just get up and move on. Like that much difference happens over 800 years to where the point where he's just he doesn't even care that he got killed anymore. It's absolutely terrifying. And the fact that Hua Chong like falls to his knees dumbfounded, like, oh my God, literally is terrifying that Hua Chong saw him like kill himself. It's insane, right? It's just so scary. And then luckily, before anything crazier happens, Feng Shen and Mu Qing show up. And I just love that Feng Shen is so pissed off. He's like, what is this? And like, burn all these naked women. Let's go. And Mu Qing's just like, gross. Mu Qing is suspicious. He's suspicious, y'all. Mu Qing is quite suspicious. I'm just going to put it out there. He's suspicious. And we're gonna put him on here. I'm going to say again, please do not confirm or deconfirm things I'm about to theorize about, because I want to be surprised when we find out the answers, because I could be wrong. I could be very wrong, but I don't want to know yet. I want to find out for myself as a read. He's suspicious because he shows up. It's not suspicious in this moment though. It's just kind of Mu Qing's character. Feng Shen naturally overreacts and has this big emotive reaction to things, and Mu Qing's just like, gross. And they both find him in the cave. He's mildly disgusted. And finding Shi Lian in a state, I'm glad they both looked horrified, because there's Shi Lian like in the worst possible state. And I'm glad they didn't do anything to Hua Chong. I was afraid for a moment they were going to blame Hua Chong and say it was his fault, which we'll get back to that. But in the moment, they were like, okay, he's here. And Shi Lian's like, no, this was my fault. Everything that was happening, it's all my doing. It's fine. And they find out that Qirong ended up getting locked up in a palace. He did note that Feng Shen and Mu Qing were competent. So he told them what was going on. And at first, they weren't thinking that too much of it. But then when Qirong says that Shi Lian there was blood on the sword and it was Shi Lian's blood, they're like, oh, okay, this must be serious if Shi Lian's shed blood over it. We need to go find him. And so Shi Lian passes out on the way back, and he passed out for 3 days. And we find out that Shi Lian had not been sleeping for a month. An entire month had gone by and he hadn't been sleeping. Shi Lian. But he's out for 3 days. And they find out that people have been helping Yang in the meantime. And so he asks where Hua Chong went. And they say that he disappeared, which doesn't surprise me at all, because Hua Chong is like, he's just there for Shi Lian. And he probably doesn't want to get in trouble. So he ran off to kind of like lurk in the shadows and watch Shi Lian from afar. Which is interesting, right? Because let's talk about that for a hot second. And that's kind of going to tie up to here, that Hua Chong, as far as we know, has watched Shi Lian from the shadows. Like, he was like watching him like a hawk all this time, and only making himself noticeable when he gets a little overzealous and a little too close, right? So the big question is, why now? Why 800 years later does he show back up in Shi Lian's life? Or has he shown up over time and Shi Lian's just not remembered him? That, again, I don't want confirmation or deconfirmation, but it seems interesting to me that Hua Chong is just now making himself known. But Shi Lian's, I guess because he's ascended for the 3rd time, maybe that's why. But why didn't he appear to Shi Lian during that giant gap between his 2nd ascension and now? It was like 500 years. Why only now? I guess because he's ascended the 3rd time, but what's the point of it? So that's still a mystery to me, and I know we've got like 6 more volumes to find out, but it's still like weighing in the back of my mind. I'm just pinning it back there, right? But yeah, so he wakes up after 3 days, wonders where Hua Chong is, and they're like, he ran off, and he's like, okay. And then Shi Lian's like, so this kid is really good with a sword. Like, the first thing he says when he wakes up, he's like, Hua Chong is great with a sword. We need to train him. And he tells Mu Qing, he's like, when you see him again, I want you to tell him that I want to appoint him and we need to train him. And Mu Qing acts very suspiciously. He is like, well, Like, it just seems like he's not on board with it at all. And he makes the comment that he's like, well, we've never trained children before. And Shilian's like, I don't care. And Fengshen's more pragmatic about it. He's like, well, that's kind of against military rule. And Shilian's like, I'm a heavenly official. Military rule, my dad's the king. We can make stuff work, right? He's not concerned. I'm wondering if Mu Qing is jealous of Hua Chong. Because here's the thing. Shilian has been equally like Fengshen, Mu Qing, you guys are my right-hand men. Haha. And Fengshen has always been with Shilian since before they even met Mu Qing. So Mu Qing's probably come to accept the fact that Fengshen is not leaving Shilian's side anytime soon. That's just his character. And Mu Qing's a tsundere, so he probably secretly likes Fengshen. He's fine with him being here. But Hua Chong is different. He's a kid. But not only that, he has become this bringer of misfortune to Shilian. Right? Everything, like all the bad stuff with the temple is happening. And I'm wondering if maybe Fengshen and Mu Qing haven't secretly thought that maybe all the bad stuff with the land of the tinder and everything happening was because of Hua Chong being next to Shilian. Brought a bunch of bad luck, right? Hua Chong ends up being fine. That's the thing too. Hua Chong is fine in this whole chapter. He's kind of, emotionally traumatized by seeing Shilian in the state that he is, but Hua Chong never ends up hurt. He never gets assaulted by Shilian. The flower demons don't affect him. That's the thing too. The flower demons don't affect him. And Shilian thinks it's just the bandages, but the Goshi said from the start that he has the ominous star around him, which means that everyone around him suffers misfortune but himself. So Hua Chong has nothing wrong with him, but everything bad happens to those around him. And that's kind of the thing with Shilian. He loves Shilian. He keeps coming up next to Shilian, trying to do things for Shilian, and bad things keep happening to him. So there's this theory here that maybe Shilian's bad luck, did it really start the moment that he met Hua Chong? And has Hua Chong being around him led him to all these bad things to happen? And what do we do with that? If Shilian ever figures out that that might be the case, what would he do? I think he wouldn't care, but what do we do with that? And so I feel like there's a part of me that thinks that Mu Qing might be jealous of Hua Chong getting into Shilian's favor. But then I think the more resounding thing to me is that Mu Qing doesn't trust Hua Chong, doesn't like him, because he thinks he might be bringing misfortune to Shilian. But here's the thing too. I think he might just be jealous of Hua Chong because Fengshen and Mu Qing don't seem to realize the connection that the boy soldier is the same kid from earlier. I don't think they've made that connection because Fengshen even makes the comment, oh, that kid that's 15 or 16. I don't think they realize it's the same kid that was at the temple caught and has the star of misfortune. I don't think they realize it's him. I don't know if they've made that connection or not. So, but Mu Qing's suspicious. Very suspicious in this moment. And so Fengshen doesn't care. I wondered if Fengshen or Mu Qing maybe think that Hua Chong's influence on Shilian might be a bad thing, or that they don't think, because they make comment that Shilian gets drunk on delight watching people battle with their swords and practice and train. So they might think he might end up spending too much time focusing on Hua Chong if he were to appoint him. We'll see, right? But Shilian, I think it's interesting, goes to pray to Junwoo, but goes to the temples, doesn't go directly to the heavenly realm. I think there's something to that. We're going to put here that he goes to pray to Junwoo at the temple. Now, he makes the comment that, oh, Junwoo gets thousands upon thousands of prayers a day. There's no way he'll hear mine, and it's just by chance if he hears it. Bullshit. No, I think he did hear Shilian's prayer. I think he did because he likes Shilian. We're going to talk about that. I think he did hear it, but months pass, right? Months pass, and things ease up, right? It is definitely the calm before the storm. Right? The calm before the storm, as if we hadn't had enough of a storm already. It's the calm before the storm because things ease up. Like the Yongin battles get a little bit more weak. Yongin starts to feel like they're not as up and up as they were. There's no word about Long Ying. He seems to be MIA. We're not hearing anything from him. And then Shilian feels like the people of Shanla start to relax a little bit. Like, oh, okay, maybe things are going to settle down and calm down. Maybe that was the worst of it, right? And Shilian takes this opportunity months later to go and kind of stroll around leisurely the Martial Deity Avenue, and which happens to be where he met Hua Chong. And he feels this gaze staring at his back and eventually crosses paths with Hua Chong. And Shilian's like, oh, you're from that night. Now, I think that this is a great setup because Shilian gets a little bit embarrassed when he remembers that Hua Chong saw him that way. He's like, oh, you're the only one that has seen me in that state, which I think is really important. He's like, you're the only one who's seen me in that state before. He's like, nobody else has seen me like that. Like when Mu Qing and Feng Xin showed up, things were still okay again. They were at least better, right? He was impaled to the ground. But he's like, you're the only one who's ever seen me like moaning and in that state before. He's like, ugh. Which I think is a nice little sneaky MXTX setup to be like, if Shilian ever realizes, and when he does realize that Hua Chong is the kid from before, he's gonna be like, oh my God, you've seen me like this. And Hua Chong's like, yes, I did. So it's like, So, but he gets embarrassed. He feels reddened and he's like, feels like this is going to be awkward. And he's like, oh, so it was you. He's like, I was going to look back for you a few months ago, but there was so much stuff happening. He's like, why are you in the city? Aren't you a soldier? And Hua Chong is surprised. And he's like, I'm not in the army anymore. And Shilian's like, why not? And they both come to this startling realization that neither of them know what's been going on. And Hua Chong says, I was kicked out. You didn't know? And Shilian's like, I told Mu Qing to come find you and settle you in and get you appointed. Why did you not listen to my instructions? What's going on? And so again, suspicious because Mu Qing, why? If Mu Qing saw that Hua Chong had been kicked out of the army, why didn't he say anything? Did he have Hua Chong kicked out of the army to save Shilian and disobey his instructions? I don't think it was Feng Xin, because Feng Xin has been like, by the book, I will listen and do everything that Shilian says, which again, his own worst enemy. Why did he tell Mu Qing to do it? Why didn't he tell Feng Xin to do it? Feng Xin, if he had commanded Feng Xin would have sought Hua Chong out, picked him up by the leg and just said, let's go, and transplanted him and appointed him. But he didn't do that. He gave the role to Mu Qing. So, curious, right? But Hua Chong's relieved by this. He's excited and happy, saying, so you didn't know. And he's like, I thought, meaning he thought that Shilian kicked him out, that he didn't like him anymore. And Shilian's like, wait a minute. And so there's these questions. Why did you get kicked out? Who kicked you out? Why did you think I would know? What did you thought? And he's about to tell him, and that's when the stupid man starts screaming, and we know he's holding his face, that it's the human face disease. Of all times, of all places. So there are 4 questions that we get asked here that we, the audience, I feel like, again, sneaky MXTX, giving us these 4 questions that we're not going to find the answers to until much later. Probably. So the questions being, why was Hua Chong kicked out? Who kicked you out? Why did you think I would know? And then he's like, what had you thought? I think that why was he kicked out? I think because Mu Qing didn't want him anywhere near Shilian because he thought he was bad luck, or because he was jealous and didn't want Shilian to take him under his wing. 1. I think these 2 are connected. I think Mu Qing kicked him out. I think that was the case. And then I think that Muqing told Hua Chong that Xilian didn't want anything to do with him. I think that Muqing told him that. And so there's that whole thing. And then what did you thought? I think that Hua Chong had thought that Xilian didn't care about him anymore and didn't want to see him anymore. And that's why he's so excited when he finds out that's not the case. So MXTX is like, maybe you'll find answers to these out in this volume. Maybe. But yeah, and then of course we hear a scream and it's human face disease time. Now, a theory, you could go about this one of two ways. One, Bai Wusheng, who has not made an appearance at all since that night, has been biding his time and waiting for Shanla to get relaxed. He was waiting until Shanla was at its lowest, like most peaceful, vulnerable point to snap the human face disease and say, let's go. Like waiting, biding his time. Because Bai Wusheng seems like a patient ghost. Like, I'll wait. Again, work smarter, not harder. Like, I'll wait till y'all are vulnerable and then I'll strike like a snake. And so I feel like he was just waiting, biding his time for this all to take place. Or, I don't know. Maybe my question with this is that maybe the heavenly realm is involved in this. And they're striking down to just get at Xilian and just let things happen according to their own rhythm. We'll see. But oh my gosh. Yeah. So many questions, y'all. So many questions this set of chapters. And I'm suspicious of Muqing now. You know, he's been the cause of all our cliffhangers. Maybe there's a reason. I don't want to be confirmed or deconfirmed. He's on my suspicious list for sure. I feel like there's so much set up in these chapters for the future, and the MXTX is like, just keep that in the back of your head. Think about it, because there's been so many tie-ins to the last several volumes in this set of chapters that I'm like, okay, that beautiful red string of fate. Also, so we have the setup of Yiming here. We have Yiming set up where Hua Chong told me he was good with a saber. Now we gotta wait for Ruyi, which I'm excited about. But yeah. Whew. So here's my thing. I think what I'm going to do from now on is wait at least until Wednesday each week so I can get some comments from the chapters, hear what you all have to say. Please no hints, clues, or spoilers, confirming or deconfirming theories, especially if you read the novel. But I'm going to wait a little bit to see if there's any comments. And then if I don't see the Manhua chapters out by Wednesday, I'm going to just chuck right through and we'll go for it, right? And we'll just see what happens. It may be Thursday when I read the chapters, maybe Friday, but I'm definitely going to not wait a full week until the weekend to try to read them, or at least that's my plan, because I can't wait. But hopefully we'll get chapter 87 next week. I have a feeling if we're dealing with the human face disease, we might need it. So, in any case, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. I'm curious to hear your comments down below. I hope you all enjoyed this chapter's reaction and discussion, but I'll be back next week with chapters 84, 85, and 86 of Heaven Official's Blessing.